Welcome. Glad to have you joining us today for effective planned giving for effective outcomes. I want to thank our presenters and the people who are making this possible on the IT end, and also thank all of you for joining us. One of the questions I hear most often, especially since the pandemic hit, is how can we help? And broader than that, I often hear, and Ryan Todd will agree with this, we hear we don't do a good enough job of letting people know how they can give. And so we know that we have so many generous alumni, so many enthusiastic alumni who want to help. And that was really the genesis of this webinar today, was to provide some of that information. So I didn't mention, I'm Dean Margaret Williams from the Rawls College of Business. And again, welcome to everyone. And I will turn it over to Ryan Todd, who is our Senior Director of Development, and he'll work through some of the detail you need to be aware of today. So again, welcome and thanks for being here.
Great, thank you, Margaret. Again, my name is Ryan Todd. I'm the Senior Director of Development for the Rawls College of Business, meaning that I work with our alumni, donors, friends, corporate partners, foundations on private support and giving to the Rawls College. I want to thank everybody for your time today. I know the lunch hour is always kind of a funny time, but we figured you could grab a sandwich and participate as we go through this. And overall, I hope you learned something today. I hope Greg and Nathan, myself as needed, will provide either some new insights, some new thoughts that get your brain churning a little bit on not only how to give, but how to give with some effectiveness and give in a way that makes sense for everybody. A couple of housekeeping things. Please keep yourself on mute. We will have the chat box open. If you've got a question, we will answer those in as real of live time as possible. So down at the bottom of your Zoom, there is a chat function that will allow you to ask questions, and we will be monitoring that and answering those as we can. We are recording today, so if for some reason you do need to step out, or you are interested in seeing our wonderful smiling faces again and again, we will have this recording available and we'll distribute that via email at the end. Our contact information will also be included in that. And so if you've got any questions, follow-up questions for myself, for Nathan, for somebody from one of our teams, we'll provide that contact information at that time. Without further ado, I want to introduce Greg Hall. Greg Hall is a 1994 Master's of Science in Accounting grad, also has his BBA from the Rawls College of Business. Wasn't the Rawls College of Business at that time. He is currently the Managing Director for Tolson Wealth Management in Dallas, Texas. Greg is a emeritus member of our Rawls Advisory Council. He's also a very active chairperson for our Dallas Scholarship Event, an annual fundraiser that generates anywhere from $250,000 in scholarship funds for our Dallas area students. I don't know that Greg knows this, but Greg's first gift was in February of 1995 to the Accounting Fund for Excellence for $50. Greg's giving has persisted through the next 25 years. And in 2013, Greg made his first major gift to establish the Greg Hall Scholarship in Accounting. In 2016, Greg decided to make a legacy type gift to the Rawls College. He made an IRA beneficiary designation to support his endowment down the line. And so, Greg, we welcome you onto this call. We thank you for your long continued support and for providing some expertise to this call today.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Can't believe it's been 25 years basically since I made that first gift, which glad you went back and looked. I hope you didn't look at all the years, because there certainly were some years in there where I might have missed out and maybe changed addresses or something and didn't get the notification in the mail. But seriously, no, you brought the history. A lot of people ask, how to get involved, and fortunately for me, I was not involved for so many years, and then when I decided to get involved, I got involved in the advisory council, and that was kind of my springboard into getting back, giving my time, giving my attention to faculty, staff, etc. But at some point, it was how do I give financially, and so I wanted to make a commitment, which I think for many folks, I counsel people and work with clients all the time. And the hardest part about giving is getting started, knowing how much to give, where to give, how to figure out, hold people accountable, hold the charities accountable for the monies that you've given. Fortunately, I think in this regard, Texas Tech's been around for so long. It's been, I've always felt comfortable about how the money's being used, and I was very specific on the cause for what I wanted the money to go for. But as Ryan mentioned, I started simply. I just wanted to create some form of annual gift that would help kids for scholarship money. I made mine very specific. You don't necessarily have to make it this specific, but in my case, I decided that I wanted to help, just knowing how expensive college is, and knowing as an accounting student, you've got to go to school probably 5 years. So there's extra hours of accounting that you have to have in which to become a CPA. I decided that I wanted to direct my funds towards junior and senior accounting majors. So, people were not discouraged financially from going and getting those extra hours and getting that extra degree, and being concerned that they're saddled with a bunch of student debt when they get out of school. So I started very simply with just a couple of year commitment to making what was an amount of $5,000 a year scholarship, and so it wasn't a large. It felt like it wasn't that large of a commitment, but it was large enough, and it was helping a lot of people. And so, a couple of years later, after seeing how that worked, I was really fortunate because there was a time, I think Ryan called me and said, "Hey, there's some matching opportunities of some funds. Now would be an awesome time if you want to start the actual endowment." And that was where I kind of jumped off the diving board into the deep end and started, making contributions that were larger than what I otherwise and probably never even envisioned making. But it was worthwhile, and it allowed my endowment to start building. And then, the accounting department they do these banquets each and every year besides their scholarship banquets. Frankly, I was involved in them back when I was a student, and most of my college was paid for through these same scholarships. But I'm able to go and participate in these banquets, and hand out the scholarships and meet the kids who are getting the scholarships. It is an amazing and, rewarding experience to just see how grateful they are and be around the youth of today and seeing these kids getting out of school and getting these great degrees, and some of our accounting students find. So for me, that's been the most rewarding thing. So later, I just decided at some point along the way, here I am giving advice to my clients, and most of our advice that we're giving to clients is in the form of with their IRAs and retirement accounts. Our clients generally aren't living off of those, and they're for all of us. It's one of the worst assets in which to leave your children, especially if you've got a large estate, you've got an estate tax, as well as those funds are still going to pay income taxes. Basically your kids could end up in that case with only 25 cents on the dollar. So for my clients, we've always been advising them to leave those to charity to the extent they're charitably inclined. And so, I don't have that large of an estate, but I decided that my kids, and no matter what I leave them, they're going to be okay. And this money is not going to be the most efficient money for me to leave to them in the future. And so I just decided in 2017 to designate the beneficiary of my IRA and my 401k as, as my endowment. And so, for me, that will be a huge, milestone. And at some point, it's going to be a large annual scholarship to multiple students, and which I feel great about because, I haven't told Ryan this, but I plan to live to 100. So it's going to be another 50 plus years before the money ever even is around and available. But yet at the same time, I know that, hey, I can live off of it during my lifetime. And Nathan's going to talk about a lot of great ideas that, most of us can, have control and live off the assets and have been, be beneficiaries of it during our lifetimes. But it's always nice to have made a planned gift and have that outstanding. And so anyway, I'm a resource. I can help people think through this stuff, but Nathan, Texas Tech, Ryan, are great resources. I utilize them extensively to help me, plan out just, my thoughts and what I was trying to do. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan. He's going to introduce Nathan. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Greg. At this time, Nathan Rice will give you maybe not as extensive of an introduction as I did for Greg, but Nathan is our Senior Director of Plan Giving for the Texas Tech system. That's an important designation in that Nathan works across all 4 component institutions, being both health science centers as well as Angelo State. And so we do have a number of families, a number of donors that support multiple of the institutions, and Nathan's able to be the single kind of clearinghouse for all of our planned giving. And he'll talk through a lot of what those vehicles are and what kind of gifts we're seeing. Nathan's been with Texas Tech for 11 years in a variety of roles. He sat in my seat as the director of development for the Talkington College of Visual Performing Arts. He's been a frontline fundraiser for the Health Science Center, and for the last number of years has led our planned giving efforts across the system. I think Nathan, I view him as a master connector. He's wonderful with financial advisors. He's wonderful with estate planners. He's wonderful with accountants. He's wonderful with all of the moving pieces that are required to execute some of this stuff. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Nathan Rice.
Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate that. Thank you and Dean Williams for having me, and your teams who are putting this all together. And Greg, thank you especially for being our testimonial for everything that you've done and showing everyone else why the impact of what you're doing is so important to you, and your scholarship will have a positive impact on accounting students forever, in perpetuity. So it's wonderful, and we're very grateful for it. We'll jump in the overview of what we're going to look at today. We'll talk about what gift planning is in general, the most common types of planned gifts that we see here within the Texas Tech system, and those across nonprofits in general. We'll talk a little bit about why gift planning is important for not just nonprofits, but for donors, how to document those different types of gifts here within the Texas Tech system. And then we'll try to leave some time for questions and answers. We'll go through a good amount of information pretty quickly, but we'll try to leave information or time at the end for question and answers. And by all means, if we don't get a lot of time for that, then, Ryan's team and I, we're here and happy to help after the presentation. So what is gift planning? Gift planning is when a donor wants to make a gift to a charity, but they want to take a second and not just write a check. They want to look at their tax considerations, their personal finance, their assets, and make the smartest gift possible. Charitable intentions is probably the most important word on this slide. If you have someone who has charitable intent, they want to make a gift to the Rawls College of Business, they just don't know how to do it, we can find the smartest asset with just a little bit of a conversation with donors and financial planners. We can find the smartest way for you to make that gift with the greatest impact. At 90%, not just within the Texas Tech system, but across nonprofits across the US, 90% of what you see with the planned gifts, the deferred gifts, are gifts through wills and beneficiary designations. And we deal with not just the planned side, but also appreciated assets that we'll get into. For donors and for some financial advisors, my office acts as the butt removers. So a donor has charitable intent. I want to start a scholarship in accounting for business students, but I'm concerned about income. But everything I have is, tied up in the sale of my business. But, I have this vacation property I don't know what I'm going to do with. We can find the smartest asset to remove that but and help you make an impact on these students. The reason that we look at appreciated assets and planning of it is because as a nation, all of us, our wealth is not in our checking accounts. If you're giving out of your checking account, it's wonderful, it's amazing, but a true gift out of your wealth can have much more impact, not just on the nonprofit, but on your tax situation, on your personal finance, your capital gains. So we talk a lot around appreciated assets, and we'll get in that throughout this presentation. The most common types of plan gifts that we see across the system are willed gifts, beneficiary designations, they're gifts of those appreciated assets. We work with qualified charitable IRA distributions and donor advised funds, external, and then also the ability to work with a donor advised fund internally in the future. We take charitable gift annuities on. We have a decent pool of charitable gift annuities, and we have an example on that. And then we'll talk a little bit about charitable trusts here towards the end. And if we can go forward 2 slides, there we go. And the next one, oh, look at that. Look at that amazingly cute baby. This is my daughter, Ellison, who will make 3 separate appearances with her shocked, curious face throughout the presentation. Rawls College of Business donors, we have 126, the last time I checked, donors like you who have documented a planned gift with the College of Business. Whether it's a will, trust, beneficiary designation, or one of the other vehicles we'll discuss, this is a great number. This is a great group of alumni and donors who are supporting the college, but we know there are a lot more of you out there that already have these plans in your plans, and we just haven't documented them with Ryan's team, with Dean Williams. So we'll encourage you to think about throughout the presentation, have you considered making a gift to the Rawls College of Business through a will, trust, or beneficiary designation? Because even though we are on a Zoom call, look around you. You're surrounded by donors and supporters of Texas Tech who make gifts like this. Donors like you make gifts through their wills, trusts, and other beneficiary designations. And normally these are the largest gifts we ever make as an individual.
Hi, Nathan, before you move on, we have a question, and
yes, sir.
You can fit it in how you want. The question is, can you work with our financial planners and estate attorneys? Elaborate how that works.
Absolutely. So it goes, the communication starts one of a couple different ways. Either a donor will contact me and say, I'm at the very beginning of this. I know I want to make a gift. I'm not sure what asset to be able to use. We can talk about what their assets are when it comes to IRAs, real estate, other appreciated assets. And then from there, we loop in Greg or an estate planner, someone on their team that we can talk through the smartest way to make this gift. On the flip side of that, I was just talking with an attorney this morning. We get contacted directly by an attorney or a financial advisor. And that person generally has been given permission to identify who the donor is, and then they'll start the conversation. We'll loop in the donor and the college and talk about what's most important to them and the smartest way to make that happen. So as I mentioned, the most common, and keep the questions coming, by all means, feel free to type those in. The most common, as I mentioned, will, trust, and beneficiary designations. These are all pretty simple gifts that we can all make, but the beneficiary designation, we want you to think outside of just the most common IRA and insurance policies. These days, you can do a beneficiary designation on almost any financial asset. In Texas and a number of other states, you can do beneficiary designations on real estate. What this does is it keeps them from going through that probate process. So they're not tied to your will. They don't have to go through. They just pass as a contract gift to the beneficiary listed in your plan. And Greg mentioned it a little bit earlier, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit more on the IRA slide, but some new laws have made it even less beneficial to leave IRAs to an individual who's not your spouse. That 10-year non-spouse rule where if they're not your spouse, they have to draw the entire balance down within 10 years. The tax implications involved with that can get complicated. The best thing on these, most common.
Hey, Nathan?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
You know, one thing I would mention too, that, I mean, I said I designated my whole IRA. I mean, you don't have to designate the whole account. It can be just a portion of the account. You know, it's totally up to you. So that's just one thing. And certainly all these other assets, very similar. I mean, you can designate just a small portion of the assets.
That's a great point. I'm glad you said it, because we see them on all levels. We've seen 100%, but we see 50% going to a spouse, 50% coming to charity, down to 25 and 10%. So well said. It can be any percentage of that asset. And a little bit of planning here, just when you're talking about charitable intent and giving, a little bit of planning goes a long way in the impact of that gift. And we're happy to work with donors with all sorts of complex assets.
So at this time, I'd like, okay, I'm not muted. Matthew, if you'll kick it over to me, I want to talk through a couple different live examples of donors that are supporting the Rawls College of Business. The first one, if you'll bring that slide back up, was a will trust designation. So the Texas Tech Foundation was named as the willed gift. And Don and Vicki Howe, this one is a fun gift. So Don was actually on the golf course. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, but he was on the golf course. He was playing golf with a couple buddies, and they were actually talking about how much they supported their alma maters. And their alma maters don't necessarily matter, but Don sent a one-sentence email to Nathan's predecessor, Byron Kennedy. For many that know him, Byron now runs the advancement shop for Texas Tech University. And it just said, I want to talk about leaving a part of my will to Texas Tech. And Byron had never heard of Don Howe. We had never talked to him. And long story short, after many conversations and a lot of thoughtful back and forth, Don decided to do two things. He decided to support the Rawls College of Business, and he also decided to do support for Texas Tech Athletics. Within the College of Business, he is endowing a chair, and we can get into what all of these things mean. And he's also doing a scholarship endowment. These two things are really important to the long-term success, scholarships and faculty support. What I think is most interesting is that Don did this gift and had this thought before he was really all that involved with the university. Since then, you can see in this photo, Don came in last fall. He spoke to our Scoville Business Leadership Program about his career, and Don has actually become an annual gift type supporter. So he uses a donor advised fund to make annual support to a variety of things. And what's fun is that it's not these two gifts. He generally has an annual conversation with Dean Williams, and they go back and forth on what Margaret's most pressing needs are. And from there, Don, he thinks it over and he decides, okay, I'm going to do $1,000 here and $5,000 here. And those amounts fluctuate on an annual basis. And I just think it's a great example of how a planned gift and leaving a portion of his estate to the university has led to more engagement with not only the college, but Texas Tech Athletics, and is able to support the college now. So that is a straight beneficiary designation. As a chunk of his estate, he's doing a percentage, and those percentages are then parsed out among the 3 or 4 buckets that he's established internally. So a singular gift that will come into the university. The university then has internal documentation, and we know exactly how much Mr. Howe wants to put in each of those buckets. If we'll go to the next slide. I will talk about this briefly, and Nathan, if you will also chime in. We often get asked, hey, what paperwork do I need to file when I do these things? We keep this as absolutely simple as possible. Every planned gift works through what we call our Matador Society form. The Matador Society is our giving society for people that have documented planned gifts to the system. And it is our ability to thank and recognize and celebrate you now, even though the gift is coming at some point in time later down the road. You can see on here, it's as simple as a donor name, the gift description, so your estimated value of gift, and then the gift purpose. There may be a secondary gift agreement that further outlines the gift purpose, but really all we need to document planned gifts are the Matador Society form, along with the verbiage that either your attorney or your financial advisor or whomever will provide. And it's not the whole thing, it's just the chunk that outlines the Texas Tech. Now, if we'll go to the next one. This is another beneficiary designation type gift. Nelda Jett is a local Lubbock insurance broker. She's been in Lubbock a long time. She's a College of Business graduate, and she left a partial beneficiary of her life insurance policy to establish two separate scholarship endowments. So the Nelda K. Jett Scholarship in Business and the Nelda K. Jett Scholarship in Theater. Another example of a donor deciding to support multiple units at Texas Tech. And so Nelda's policy will provide that support whenever the designated time is. Again, on the Matador Society form, we need the form filled out, and then we need a bit of beneficiary designation page from your documentation.
And to chime in on that Matador Society form, just so you know, the Matador Society, what we do is we do an event once a year where we induct new members and we celebrate current members, so everyone can come together, not this fall, but generally in the fall, to celebrate and thank people for the gifts that they've done. It holds the university and the system accountable for your goals for the gift. So it lines out exactly what you want, so that no matter who's in my chair or Ryan's chair 100 years from now, we know exactly, and Texas Tech is accountable for the goals that you have outlined for that gift. And then down in the last thing, that donor recognition line, if you want it to be anonymous, we're absolutely fine with that. On that, you can say whether your name or the gift amount or both can be public or anonymous. That's all I had, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. The last one, John and Nancy Richardson, they were, this goes back, and this is something, Greg, I think you can probably provide some pretty significant insight into. When you become, and I think it's changed for this year, but normally 70 and a half, you are entering into qualified required minimum distribution time, and there's a new permanent law that allows for charitable qualified distributions to leave your IRA and go support the beneficiary of your choice. So what the Richardsons are doing is they're taking their annual qualified charitable distributions from their IRA. They've created a scholarship endowment for that is current. It is actively being funded, supports junior and senior level Rawls College of Business students. And then what they did at the end is they did an IRA beneficiary designation to support their endowment at the end. So they are actively funding it now. They are getting scholarship thank you letters. They are meeting these students. They are reaping the rewards of funding it now. They're meeting their required minimum distribution requirements from the IRS, and they're getting the charity distribution as well. So this is kind of a twofold gift. It was the required minimum distributions and an IRA beneficiary designation. Greg, like yourself, Mr. Richardson has said he's going to live forever, and so there won't be any money left at the IRA beneficiary part.
But I think what you've just told me is that I can start giving $100,000 a year from my IRA directly to my endowment versus waiting. I think you were insinuating that is what I could feel.
Yes, let's start paying it down. Let's start withdrawing from it. We have a question from the chat. Is the Matador Society just for deferred gifts? Yes, it is. The Matador Society is one of our giving societies. There are a couple other giving societies that the system has, but the Matador Society is for deferred/planned giving.
And to touch on that, it is deferred gifts, but it includes other gift vehicles that provide current benefits. So we'll talk about charitable trusts and charitable gift annuities. While the remainder interests of those gift vehicles are charitable, there are current income benefits and other benefits that donors can get. Ellison is shocked by the $8 trillion in American IRA accounts. The baby boomer generation is the wealthiest and most charitable generation in the history of mankind. So what we're going to see, what we're seeing now, and what we're going to see just research-wise over the next 50 years is the largest charitable support that we've seen, both current and deferred, in the history of mankind. We talked a little bit a second ago about qualified charitable distributions. For these, I know required minimum distributions, or RMDs, were suspended for this year, but they didn't suspend your ability to make this type of gift. You can still do a qualified charitable distribution after you're 70 and a half years old, up to $100,000 per individual. It goes directly to nonprofit. You don't cash it out. It goes directly from your IRA administrator to Texas Tech Foundation. This only applies to traditional IRAs, but Greg can talk about it too. 401ks can be rolled into IRAs. Again, with a little bit of conversation around what assets we're talking about, we can find a smarter way to make gifts. And on the next slide, it talks a little bit about how they work. The tax benefit is that those distributions are not included in your adjusted gross income. So a lot of our donors have invested many different ways. And when they get to 70 and a half, a good amount are still working, and they don't need the additional income from a required minimum distribution. So they use those to start scholarships, support their existing scholarships, and keep that amount out of their adjusted gross income. It satisfies those required minimum distributions. Obviously, you can support whatever area it is within Rawls College of Business that you want to support. And but we do make a point, there is no charitable deduction for a qualified charitable distribution. The tax benefit is keeping it out of your income. If you also took a deduction, then the IRS might knock on your door, and none of us want that. Greg, did you have anything on QCDs? I know we talked about it yesterday. Oh, you're muted. No, okay. So it's a very smart way to make a gift once you qualify for it. That can be very impactful. The real estate slide that we're bringing up, there are just two things I want to talk about, and I'm glad you mentioned the Richardsons, Ryan, because we talked to Mr. Richardson early on too about using one of these real estate gift vehicles to offset some taxes that he was dealing with. So two different things we want to talk about when it comes to real estate. Those are charitable remainder trust. So a charitable remainder trust, we're working on two of these right now with different colleges. It's allowing a donor to take some land that's in East Texas that they don't have any further use for. It's an appreciated asset, but they also want to have income for a husband and wife for the rest of their lives. So with that charitable remainder trust, what they can do, they deed that land over to their trust. The trust then sells it, and all of that sale proceeds stays within the trust. So it doesn't pay capital gains when it liquidates the asset. So the more money you have in the trust, obviously, the better investment you can make with a larger pool of money. Now, you will pay taxes on that, but you pay taxes on a charitable remainder trust when the income comes out to the donor. So it mitigates that capital gains tax over 20 years or a lifetime. If you can move forward to the next one. The other one I wanted to talk about is what we talked to Mr. Richardson about.
And real quick, we had a point of clarification on the qualified charitable distribution. That age changed to 72. Is that accurate?
You don't have to take required minimum distributions until you're 72, okay, but you can still do qualified charitable distributions at 70 and a half.
Okay, thank you.
Is my understanding. The charitable remainder interest or life estate. So this is a very unique way to make a gift through real estate. And right now it's very advantageous because that last point there, the current 75/20 rate, the rates for these, for the amount of a deduction that you get with the IRS is the best I think that it's almost ever been. So with the charitable remainder interest, you take your primary residence or farmland or vacation home, and you say, I'm going to deed over the inheritance rights to Texas Tech. So I'm going to live in the property for the rest of my life. I'm going to maintain the property. I'm going to pay the property taxes. But today, I'm going to deed everything over to where when I pass, it immediately goes to Texas Tech. So making that type of an irrevocable gift today allows you to take a tax deduction today. So you get an appraisal this year, say you have a $100,000 house. If you're 59 years old right now, the last time I looked at the rates, which was maybe 2 weeks ago, you could deduct $87,000 today for deeding over the inheritance rights of that property to Texas Tech. That number's huge. The rates are better than they have been. And that obviously, extrapolate that out to larger value of the property. It's basically 87% of it. So very unique. We're having conversations with a couple of different donors about this just because the rates are where they are. I just wanted to point it out really quick. There are a lot of different ways to make gifts of real estate. These are just two.
Nathan, there's a question that asks, Anita, we may have you come off mute if we need to clarify anything here, but do you have to sell the real estate in the charitable remainder trust or keep it as an income property?
If you want to use that, the liquidation event, if you want to use that money for income, then yes, you have to liquidate the property because that's where the money comes for those income payments. But if it's an income producing property and the trust just is the owner asset manager of it, then you don't have to liquidate it. The only time that you really have to liquidate it is if you're looking for that income stream out of the trust. And we do the way that we've done these, they're almost called flip trusts, so that the asset goes into the trust. There's no income generated. There's no income stream until that asset sells. Then the trust is valued and the income payments come out. And we've got an example for that coming up here too. We can move on to the next slide. We talked a little bit about appreciated assets. This is a slide from Dr. Russell James, who is a great resource. He is kind of he's a nationally and almost world-renowned charitable financial planning, charitable giving research guru, and he's actually a professor here in the College of Human Sciences and Personal Financial Planning at Texas Tech. They did a study, the government released right around 1,990,000 from nonprofits. So they dug into the numbers and realized giving non-cash assets, specifically appreciated stock, helps nonprofits grow just multiples exponentially over the years that they start accepting specifically appreciated stocks. If you go to the next slide, this talks a little more particularly about that highly appreciated stock is very effective. When we're looking at giving, obviously we're talking about giving to the Rawls College of Business and the Texas Tech system, but this applies to all of the charities that you support as a donor. If you have a charity that you love, that you volunteer with, and they're not accepting appreciated stock, you should pull them aside, sit down, get them with Morgan Stanley or get them with someone who can allow them to accept appreciated stock, because it will help them to grow exponentially over the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. You can make a gift. So as a nonprofit, we don't pay capital gains tax. So when you transfer that stock to Texas Tech Foundation, we sell it, and that entire amount of the value of the stock, the day that we sell it, is used for your gift. So it can have a larger impact, and it removes that capital gains from your portfolio. So then on this last bullet point, if you love that stock, if that's your favorite stock, by all means, use the cash that you were thinking about using for the gift and buy back into your favorite stock. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's a smart way to make a gift and remove those gains from your portfolio.
And I'll chime in real briefly. From a College of Business standpoint, we've seen, especially the way the equity markets went the last number of years, we've seen a large increase in appreciated stock giving. So folks that would normally make just write a check, now they're calling and making a transfer of stock. And I agree with Nathan there that it's an incredibly smart way to give.
The next slide gets into charitable gift annuities. We'll do, I think I did, just because the rates were so good, I did 4 in December for donors, but normally we'll see between 2 and 4 a year. This is a donor who, again, has charitable intent. They want to make a gift, but they're concerned about income for the rest of their life and generally their spouse's lifetime. So what you can do, just like a commercial annuity, except the rates are only slightly different, you make an irrevocable gift today that guarantees you income for the rest of your life. If you live to be 120, like Greg's going to be, you'll still get those annuity payments every year, no matter what. And you get, because it's an irrevocable gift, that the remainder of what's left in it will go to charity, you get an upfront tax deduction. And this tax deduction for this, and like I mentioned with the charitable life estate, these deductions, you may think, oh, I couldn't use all that deduction in a year. Those deductions can be spread over the next 5 tax years. If you have these large deductions from gifts like this in 1 year, you can work with your financial advisor, with your tax person, and you can spread those deductions over the next 5 tax years. The income, as I mentioned, lasts for up to 2 lifetimes, and eventually it ends up just tax-wise to be ordinary income at some point, but a portion of it is tax-free in the beginning because it's a charitable gift annuity and not a commercial gift annuity. This incredibly complicated. We've used this. I think I've used this. I know Byron used to use it in his presentations. It's the easiest, best way to explain the next 2 very smart but can be complicated charitable trusts. So a charitable remainder trust, which I talked about with the land gift earlier, your donor here on the left transfers assets, cash, land, a jet ski, a vintage Corvette, whatever you want. Trusts are very flexible when it comes to what kind of assets they can accept. Transfer all that into the trust liquidates the asset, and then the income comes back to the donor for a term of years or for a lifetime. The remainder of what's in that trust afterwards goes to charity. So on the next slide, you can see a brief illustration of what the numbers look like just on a very basic chart. We can do custom illustrations for anyone if you wanted to see what it would be, what kind of asset it is. No matter what your basis is in it, we can run an illustration for you. It allows donors to spread income out over a lifetime, to mitigate capital gains, and then to support their charitable intent when the trust matures. I see this used a lot through estates and while donors are still living to support a surviving spouse or an heir. And I've seen it a few times recently for an irresponsible heir. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say irresponsible, but this is someone who I know they're not going to be able to manage the asset. Most people who get a large inheritance, the numbers say the vast majority of people mismanage those funds, or they run out of it within a handful of years. This allows you to provide a steady income stream for an heir for the rest of their lifetime while also making a gift to charity. And the charitable deduction again here just depends on how the trust is set up, but you can spread that again over the next 5 tax years. The next trust we'll talk about is the unicorn of trust, and Greg and I talked a little bit about yesterday because it's so unique. In this case, this is a donor who you can lock $1 million in a closet and not look at it for 10 years, and it's not going to affect your standard of living. So they are rare in that they're for that kind of donor who could do that. But that's because the income in this, you transfer the assets to the trust, the income goes to the charity first. So the charity benefits from the trust. Normally, we'll see them for a period of around 10 years. And then the remainder of what's in the trust either goes to beneficiaries or it can go back to the donor, depending on how you set it up. If you go to the next slide, this one is used, I think Jackie Onassis was the most famous charitable lead trust of the last century, and she used it to pass down generational wealth, to be able to support children and grandchildren and get some of those estate tax considerations out of the way. You can see here, over a period of 10 years, if it's paying out 5% at $1 million, then that charity is getting $50,000 a year. So they have a gift stream that they can count on. So a lot of charities will use them for capital projects. If they're trying to expand a building or build a program or build an endowment, expand a church, they'll use these for that income stream that they can depend on. And then as long as the assets in the trust are making more than 5% on their investments, you end up with more than what was in there to begin with. So these are very rare, but they're very beneficial for donors who can take advantage of them, both to get the assets down generationally to other beneficiaries, but also back to themselves, if that's the intent.
Can we go back 2 slides real quick? Nathan, there's a question that says, will we eliminate capital gains tax on the charitable remainder trust? Will we pay ordinary income tax on distributions, which could be a higher tax rate? And Greg, this may be a question you can help answer as well.
Greg, did you want to jump on that?
It's on a charitable remainder trust, it kind of depends to a degree, meaning let's say you put a stock in the trust day one, say it has 0 basis. So all of that gain, now the money gets, from the sale of the asset, the money gets reinvested. And over the term of the trust, if that new investment money generates ordinary income, and let's say it's $100,000 and it's generating $3,000 of dividend income a year. If it's in the public markets, well, your distribution that you get, let's say, of $5,000 a year, would be $3,000 as a dividend, and the additional $2,000 is going to come out in the form of capital gains that you had originally had from the sale of the asset. If that money is reinvested and it generates, let's say, rental income, for whatever reason, which is subject to ordinary income tax rates, then the ordinary income gets paid out first. So you can't defer the ordinary income. So there's buckets and categories within these trusts. When a distribution gets made, the ordinary income goes first. To the extent there's more income being distributed than the amount of the ordinary income, then it goes to these other categories, which is either short-term capital gains or long-term capital gains. So unfortunately, after you've recognized the initial gain, it depends on how the assets are invested and what kind of income gets generated going forward. So it's kind of complex. I mean, it's these aren't for the faint of heart. You wouldn't want to do this for too small of a dollar amount just because of, the administration costs. I mean, there's a tax return that has to be filed associated with this and so forth. I don't know, Nathan, does the university, let's say the gift is solely to the university, do they help you with any of the administration?
I'm glad that you asked that. We use High Ground Advisors out of Dallas. They manage all of our charitable trusts, and they manage our gift annuity pool as well. And if anyone has questions, even just informational purposes, I've got a call tomorrow on a charitable remainder trust with some land out of East Texas, where it's just our first conversation, and we talk with High Ground about all of these things. What are the administrative costs? What does it look like? How do I deed it over to my trust? And we're happy to answer any and all questions, even down to as you mentioned, the different buckets of taxes when they come out and income payments. Happy to answer any of those questions with specifics to a donor.
So someone donating may want to start with you in terms of understanding the idea and the concept and how it might play out, and then maybe go back to their advisors once they've decided, because assume you guys aren't going to charge me to answer those questions where my advisor may charge me, right?
We won't charge you for that or assets under management.
Okay.
Yeah, we can get all those questions answered, and internally about how they work, and then specifically as far as how it'll be operated with High Ground. And then we bring in financial advisors for the donor on those conference calls too. And then we have donors who even say, okay, that's great, but I think my team can run my charitable remainder trust better than who you're using. And we have plenty of donors who have charitable remainder trusts outside of the High Ground, outside of the company that we use. So again, we just want to find the best fit for each donor.
We might go back to the gift annuity. This is an area which I'm starting to see our clients more and more interested in that they've maybe have recently sold a business and their incomes went away, and they're looking at how do I replace my income. They, for whatever reason, have had a very low, lifestyle need, and they've got more assets than what they need. They're also charitably inclined, and they're not big risk takers when it comes to investing in the market. So what I've seen some of these clients start to do is actually go ahead and do the gift annuity. They're funding their church or any organization, charitable organization, in return for that annuity, which the annuity rate, could be as much as 5%, where that they can invest that in a safe asset, let's say in the form of a treasury. You're getting nowhere near that kind of return. We're starting to see more and more of that, and people interested. And I think it's going to carry over more, on larger dollar amounts into charitable trust and maybe charitable deed trust as well.
And we talked about it briefly yesterday, but we don't use it as a sales technique for charitable giving, but charitable people live longer than the rest of the general population. So the more you give, the better chance you've got of making it to 120. If you go forward a couple of slides, we're looking at documenting planned gifts. And Ryan touched on this a little bit earlier. Why should it matter to you Why should you document your planned gift or any of your different gift vehicles with Texas Tech and with the College of Business? We want you to take it seriously that you need to keep Texas Tech accountable for your goals. Your goals are incredibly important to you. When someone includes a nonprofit in their financial plan, they're elevating that person almost to the level of a family member, or that nonprofit to the level of a family member. You care so much about the mission of that institution that you're including them in your plan. So that's incredibly important. We recognize that's important, and we want to be accountable for your goals. We want to ensure that no matter what, again, no matter if it's Ryan or me, whoever's in our chair, we want to make sure your goals are being carried out in perpetuity. And the stewardship goes back a little bit to the Matador Society and Ryan with their team. We want to be able to thank you for what you've done. It is important. It is incredible. The impact these gifts have is amazing. We want to be able to give you the appropriate gratitude that you deserve for the gifts that you're making. And again, on another line, just on the internal administrative side of it, showing donor support for these types of gifts, external support in these areas shows deans and presidents, oh, okay, well, this is important to donors. Maybe we need to put more of a spotlight on this program or this area, because externally people are showing with their giving that this is something that's very important to them. So it's good internally to show support within the administration why you're doing what you're doing.
I think there's one more important note that needs to be made about planned gifts is that these can be any size, right? This can be a $5,000, designation to whatever, all the way up to whatever type of estate you've created for you or your family. And so I think oftentimes when people begin thinking about planned giving and estate giving, they think, well, my amount isn't X or my percentage can't be Y. Documenting any sort of planned gift, outline these 3 bullet points that Nathan has touched on, is significant so that we can make sure we can be held accountable, we can document it properly, we can steward it properly, and we can build support around these things. And so that's an important note that I think should be made, is that these don't have to be some outrageous amount of money to make your planned gift to Texas Tech. This is just a documentation of, look, this is something we deem important and we want to get it right now. So please keep that in mind as if you're considering something that don't let the amount stop you from making the documentation.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Ryan. We have Matador Society members from $2,000 to 7-figure gifts. So the amount of the gift, we're grateful for all of them. The amount does not matter. We want to, again, ensure that we carry it out exactly as you wish it to be carried out, no matter the amount. Matador Society, there is no limit on the top or bottom for Matador Society membership. And I'll close and then leave a little bit of time for questions and answer with the next 2 slides. We want to get back to you personally in your circles. Have you considered including a gift to the Rawls College of Business through a will, trust, or any of these other beneficiary designations or gift vehicles we've talked to about today? If you currently have it in your plan, then please work with Ryan and his team to make sure it's properly documented and that you're holding us accountable to carry out your goals. Because again, if you look around you, a lot of alumni, a lot of donors across the Texas Tech system use these gift vehicles to make some of the largest gifts they ever make throughout their lifetime. We're incredibly grateful for them, and we do our best to steward donors, and we want to be sure we're carrying them out properly. Thank you very much for your time, for spending your lunch hour here. Dean Williams and Ryan and all of your team behind the scenes who put this together, thank you for having me. And this is the last time I'll make you look at my wonderful, beautiful, amazing daughter. Any questions that are in the queue or that come up, we'll be happy to help.